It starts, in most cases, quietly. Not with a dramatic break from reality, the way movies love to show it, but with something smaller. A person in their mid-40s, someone who's spent decades building a career, raising kids, running a household, starts pulling away in small ways. They seem distracted at dinner. A colleague notices they've been saying strange things in meetings, things that don't quite connect to what's happening in the room. Their spouse describes it the same way, looking back. Something felt different, but nobody could say exactly what, and everyone assumed it was stress, or burnout, or a midlife crisis, because surely, at this age, it couldn't be that. This is one of the most overlooked truths about schizophrenia. It doesn't only begin in the dorm room or the first year of college. For a meaningful number of people, it begins here, in the middle of an already built life. Today, we're going deep into the psychology of schizophrenia, and specifically into what's called late-onset schizophrenia, developing after age 40, because it remains one of the most misunderstood and most missed presentations in mental health. Roughly 1 in 5 people diagnosed with schizophrenia first develop symptoms after 40, and because almost everyone associates this illness with youth, these cases are the ones most likely to be dismissed, misdiagnosed, or blamed on something else entirely. Let's start with what schizophrenia actually is, because the popular image is almost entirely wrong. Schizophrenia is not a split personality. That's a different condition, dissociative identity disorder, and the two get confused constantly. Schizophrenia is a disruption in how the brain processes reality itself, affecting thinking, perception, emotion, and behavior all at once. Psychiatrists describe the symptoms in 3 categories. The first is positive symptoms, meaning something is added on top of normal experience that shouldn't be there. This includes hallucinations, most often hearing voices that comment, argue, or issue commands. It also includes delusions, fixed, false beliefs held with total conviction despite clear evidence otherwise. For someone in midlife, this might take a specific shape, a growing certainty that a spouse of 20 years is secretly working against them, or that colleagues are monitoring their calls, beliefs that get mistaken at first for marital trouble or workplace paranoia rather than what they actually are. The second category is negative symptoms, something missing that should be there. Reduced motivation, a flattened emotional expression, withdrawal from a marriage, from friendships built over decades, from a job they used to be good at. In a mid-40s adult, this often gets misread as depression or a burnout phase because on the surface, it can look identical. The third category is cognitive symptoms, real difficulty with memory, focus, and the mental organization needed to hold a job or follow a conversation. For someone at the peak of their career, this can be devastating and confusing in a very specific way, because it doesn't match anything they've experienced about their own mind before. So why does it show up now, decades after the age most people assume schizophrenia begins? Research points to genetics and biology, and specifically, late-onset cases show a distinct pattern. They occur more frequently in women than in men, unlike early-onset schizophrenia, which affects men slightly more. One theory researchers point to is the drop in estrogen many women experience heading into their 40s and 50s, since estrogen appears to have a protective effect on certain brain pathways involved in psychosis. Brain chemistry, particularly the neurotransmitters dopamine and glutamate, still plays a central role, but late-onset presentations often involve somewhat different patterns than the illness that begins at 19. There's also a meaningful clinical difference worth knowing. Adults with late-onset schizophrenia tend to have less severe negative symptoms, less flattening of emotion, less profound withdrawal, and they often respond to lower doses of antipsychotic medication than younger patients need. This isn't a lesser illness. It's a different presentation of the same underlying condition, requiring its own kind of attention. Here's something worth saying clearly, because the myth is so damaging. The vast majority of people with schizophrenia, at any age of onset, are not violent. People living with the condition are far more likely to be victims of violence than perpetrators of it. For a person diagnosed in their 40s, this stereotype does something particular. It makes them terrified of being honest with their own family, their own doctor, out of fear of being seen as suddenly dangerous, when what they actually need is support. So, what does it feel like from the inside for someone this age? Imagine a mind you've trusted completely for over 40 years, the same mind that navigated a career, raised children, managed a household, suddenly generating experiences with the full weight of reality behind them. A voice as clear as your spouse's, standing right next to you. A conviction as certain as your own name that something impossible is happening. That's not a person choosing to believe something strange. That's a brain, at any age, producing an experience the person has no reason not to trust. This is why reasoning someone out of it rarely works. You cannot argue someone out of an experience that feels neurologically as real as anything you or I perceive right now. So how do you actually help someone in this situation? First, don't argue directly with the delusion's content. Telling a 45-year-old you know that's not true rarely lands and often damages trust built over decades because from their side, it is true. Instead, acknowledge the feeling without confirming the belief. I can see how frightening that feels to you, even though I'm not experiencing it the same way. Second, support consistent treatment without judgment. A late diagnosis often comes with grief, for the person and the family both, grief over lost years, over symptoms mistaken for stress or a difficult phase. With proper treatment, antipsychotic medication, therapy, and support, most people manage schizophrenia successfully and continue living full lives, including their careers and relationships. Third, watch for genuine crisis signs, not everyday symptoms. Sudden severe agitation, expressions of wanting to harm themselves or others, or a sharp break from their baseline. In those moments, contact mental health professionals or crisis services directly rather than managing it alone. Fourth, take care of yourself too. Especially if you're the spouse or adult child, suddenly recalibrating your understanding of someone you thought you knew completely. Caregiver burnout is real, and support groups for families exist specifically because this weight isn't meant to be carried alone. And above all, remember the whole person is still there. A diagnosis at 45 doesn't erase the person who built a career, raised a family, and showed up for the people they love for decades. The goal isn't to wait for them to go back to who they were. It's to stay present with who they are now, symptoms and all, while supporting the treatment that gives them real stability. If you or someone you love, at any age, is showing sudden withdrawal, disorganized thinking, a growing sense of being watched or targeted, or emotional changes lasting more than 2 weeks, don't assume it's just stress or a midlife phase. Early treatment dramatically improves long-term outcomes, at 45 just as much as at 19. Reach out to a doctor, a psychiatrist, or a mental health crisis line. In the US, call or text 988 and start the conversation.